Hello one and all, you are very welcome to Tea Lane Graveyard. I am the ghost of St. Makua, and by the way, I have two names. In Clondalkin they refer to me as St. Cronin, but here in Salvage they refer to me as my pet name, St. Makua. I have great memories of this ancient place. Although my time back in the 6th century was very different, I still vividly remember coming here on my pilgrim journey, crossing the river Neris, just where you have come from, and walking up the same path. Back then, it was part of an ancient highway called the Slee Moor, which ran from Dublin Bay to Galway Bay. It was also beside an Escariada, which was an ancient gravel ridge from the Ice Age, would you believe? The landscape here was surrounded by fields and forests. In fact, at Tea Lane, I came upon a circular enclosure, a pagan settlement. I transformed the place into a Christian site and baptized them down at the river where the mill now stands. In fact, in the village, there is a well and above it, it bears my name. So do try to look out for it next time you walk past the mill. Come with me, I have something to show you. This is where I built a small wooden church, which people have now made into stone. This is a very sacred spot. Thousands flocked here. This is where the village of Salvage evolved. After my time in Salvage was done, I continued on a Slee Moor, establishing Christian communities along the way. For example, at Timahoe. And after all that, as some of you will know, I eventually came to settle at Clondalkin, where I became the first abbot of the monastery there, and I settled for the rest of my life. And also, please do try to remember me on the 6th of August, as that's my feast day, and it would make me very happy. All so long ago.
No one knows where I was born.
No one knows where I was born.
No one knows when I was born.
No one knows when I was born.
I am one of the girls at the Salvage Charter School.
I am one of the girls at the Salvage Charter School.
It started as a charity school, the place you know as Salvage Manor Hotel. The vision of the school was set out in the will of William Connolly.
To be laid by them, a convenient building in or near to the town of Salvage, in the county of Kildare. On such spot of ground, I shall be set out for them, for that purpose, by my said dear wife and nephew, for the reception of 40 orphans or other poor children.
It was for all female residents of impoverished backgrounds. They were to be clothed and fed there. It was an orphanage, residential and exclusively female. It was built in between 1733 to 1737 by Catherine Connolly, who gave £50 a year for its maintenance during her life. Such schools tended to be founded by wealthier sections of society. The Connollys inherited financing the school down the line. In 1809, an ageing Lady Louisa Connolly agreed to the transfer of the Salvage Charity School to the Incorporated Society. It was now known as the Salvage Charter School. The Salvage Charity School and Salvage Charter School took in children of Protestant and Catholic persuasion. The Charter School in particular had a mission of conversion to the state-established church. The entries of the Salvage Charity School were often a child orphan by death of parents. Poverty was the defining factor, and this led to children being placed there where there was no one who could afford to care for them. No one knows where I was born.
No one knows where I was born.
No one knows when I was born.
No one knows when I was born.
I am one of the girls at the Salvage Charter School.
I am one of the girls at the Salvage Charity School.
1811, Catherine Fields.
1811, Eleanor Lucy.
1812, Esther Guthrie.
1813, Anne Connor.
1813, Jane Wood.
1814, Sarah Lindsay.
1815, Susanna Cullen.
1817, Margaret Martin.
1822, Margaret Coyle.
1824, Mary Ann Daly.
1824, Mary Ward.
1827, Rose Cassidy.
1828, Maria Moore.
1831, Catherine Houston.
1835, Ellen Madden.
1835, Mary Wilkins.
1839, Isabella Ross.
1845, Mary Jane Elliott.
1848, Elizabeth Duncan.
1847, Mary Ann Scarf.
1848, Eccleston, first name unknown.
1855, Lucy Delamore.
I'm the ghost of Charles James Sheridan. I was born here in Salvage on the 18th of January 1900 and I died on August 16th, 1921. Stay a while I tell you my story. I was one of 12 children born to William Sheridan and Mary Sheridan. We lived up there at 35 Main Street. My father was a bootmaker by trade, but we had pigs and chickens too. We are Catholic, so my grandfather helped raise funds to build the parish church in 1856. But we didn't stay in Salvage for too long. By the time of the 1911 census, we'd moved to Dublin and settled in Drumcondra. When the Great War broke out in 1914, two of my older brothers enlisted in the British military, one the Royal Navy and one the Royal Tank Corps. They were lucky, as they both survived. In July 1918, I joined the Royal Flying Corps when I was just 18. When the war ended that year, I was demobilised. But I did re-enlist in what was then called the Royal Air Force, and by then I was an air mechanic first class. I got the chance to work at the Airplane Experimental Station in Suffolk, England. It was exciting work working on bomber aircrafts, and I loved it. However, on August 16, 1921, there was an accident. The wing of the prototype I was on hit the corner of the hangar and was completely destroyed when taking off. Both myself and the pilot died that day. I was 21 years old. The army put up this headstone. The original Sheridan headstone disintegrated over time, but there are many, many Sheridans buried here. Although myself and my two brothers, William and Daniel, joined the British military, our other brother John did not. John joined the Irish Volunteers and fought in the 1916 Rising in the Four Courts. He's on the 1916 Roll of Honour, but he was captured during the Rising and sent to a jail in England. I can tell you, having sons fighting with and against the British Army caused a lot of conflict when my parents lived in 91 St. Ignatius Street, Drumcondra. It caused a rift in our family. However, the story goes that my two brothers donned full military regalia and went to the governor of the prison where John was held and pleaded that there was some sort of mistake. John was freed sometime afterwards, but nobody's saying that my two brothers did actually intercede on his behalf. Mum's the word. So long ago.
Oh, hello. I'm the ghost of Henry Gratton Jr. I was buried here, in Tea Lane, in 1859. I have 5 children who are buried here with me. My father, also Henry Gratton, was the famous statesman and politician who campaigned for legislative freedom for the Irish Parliament, which resulted in Gratton's Parliament. This is a great success, even if it did only last for 18 years. I followed in my father's footsteps, became a member of Parliament, and fought alongside Daniel O'Connell in the hopes that Ireland would become a free nation. Even though I was Protestant myself, I did believe that Ireland should be ruled by the Irish. Did you know that I was an author too? I wrote 5 volumes of a book about my father, titled The Life and Times of Henry Gratton. Unsurprisingly, this is generally known as one of the clearest views into Irish life in that important era in history. Truth be told, I could have a bit of a fiery temper. Someone once said about me, Gratton has as much of an attachment to his native country as which blazed in his illustrious father, but unhappily has not a tenth of the talent. How hurtful. Our family lived in Salvage Abbey, a beautiful spot just down the road there, by the banks of the River Liffey. Noted as the courting grounds of Jonathan Swift and his beloved Vanessa. My father once wrote, and among the groves and bowers of Swift and Vanessa, I grew convinced that I was right. And yes, my father was always right in his political convictions. Sometimes, when I take my ghostly stroll around Salvage at the dead of night, I see the pub known as Henry Gratton's. Most people would probably assume that it was named after my father, but I like to think that it was named after me. Anyway, I was much more fond of a pint than he was. Even though my father was buried in Westminster Abbey in London, I do like my little home here in Tea Lane too.
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy May. Do take some tea with me. I love tea parties, don't you?
You are a ghost, Nancy. These people don't know what to make of you.
Forgive me. Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Nancy Mahon, and I died aged 7 years after I was thrown from my pony Bluebell on the Arclock Road near my home in Temple Mills House. They took me to Salvage Hospital, but despite the ministrations of the surgeon Dr. Stanley Moore from Maynooth, I died a few days later on July 26, 1906. Dr. Moore said it was from the fracture of the base of the skull and shock. This is my father Thomas, in the grave next to me. He was a cricketer. The Hones were a famous cricketing family over generations. Daddy wasn't great at it, unfortunately.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Nancy May. Why don't you finish drinking your tea? It's getting cold.
He played just once for the Irish cricket team in 1877, but was unsuccessful though, only just scoring one run. Other members of Dad's family played much more for Ireland, including his two brothers Nathaniel and Geoffrey and three cousins William, Nathaniel and Leyland.
Well, I was more of a polo man myself from my time in India. Army captain with the 7th Hussars, actually. In 1886, I was one of the members of the first polo team to cross the Atlantic and resoundingly defeated the United States in the International Polo Cup.
Daddy was an exclusive member of the Hurlingham Club in London.
Yes, my polo team was a part of the Hurlingham Club, led by another Irishman, John Watson.
In fact, the Home family are eclectic, and I'm cousins with stained glass artist Evie Hode, poet usher Leyland Bradwell, and lots of famous Dutch artists.
That is enough, Nancy. Oh, my stomach can't handle another one of these tea parties.
Daddy! So long ago.
Hello, everybody. You are most welcome. I am the ghost of Catherine Connolly, and I'm so glad you've come to visit. I was married to William Connolly of Castletown, who hailed from Donegal. We both did, actually. Despite his humble beginnings, my William, an innkeeper's son, rose through the ranks of Irish society to become the Speaker of the Irish House of Commons, the Commissioner of the Revenue, and one of the 3 Lord Justices of Ireland. That is to say, he was responsible for making sure laws are passed, taxes collected, and for representing the King. He was one of the most influential men in the country and was purported to be the wealthiest to boot. It was a love match, William and I. And when he passed in 1729, I was so keen to ensure that he would be remembered. I carried on our work building Castletown House, our weekend retreat, up the road there. And I carried on my darling's plan to build a charity school for destitute young ladies, finishing it in 1740. It is now that Salvage Manor Hotel, an inn for the well-off. Sure, that was not at all what we had in mind. I also commissioned Connolly's Folly, an obelisk, finishing that in 1740, and the corkscrew-shaped wonderful barn, finished in 1743, to give employment to the poor. And of course, this monument was in my darling's honour. After dear William died, I was so keen to ensure that he would be remembered. I commissioned Thomas Carter, that very fine sculptor, to create a most wonderful monument in my darling's honour. Do allow me to show it to you. Isn't it rather splendid? It cost the sum of £2,000, but well worth it, wouldn't you agree? The marble was shipped in from Italy. Originally, 2 life-size figures of William and I were the main feature of the monument. However, they are now at Castletown House for safekeeping. There is an inscription on the slab at the back of the monument. Sadly, it is now rather faded. It's written in Latin. Do allow me to read it to you. Ah, yes, you probably can't read Latin. Allow me to translate it for you. S.C. William Connolly, who attained as a reward for his merits the highest honours, was Commissioner of the Revenue for about 20 years during the reigns of Queen Anne and King George I. And he was a Privy Councillor in the reign of George II. He was twice unanimously elected as the Speaker of the House of Commons in the Parliament of this realm, and 10 times held the office of the Lord Justice of Ireland, being the first of whom both the sovereign and the people entrusted with their privileges, with the happiest result. As a subject, he was loyal, and as a citizen, patriotic. In perilous times, he not once or twice proved he would serve his country without forgetting his duty to his king, and his king without forgetting what was due to his country. Firm, resolute, just, wise, formed by nature for the life of a statesman. His administration of affairs was crowned with success, to the great advantage of the Commonwealth. He made a modest though splendid use of the great riches he had honestly acquired. Distinguished as he was for the courtesy and integrity of his disposition, kind-hearted towards all men, and loyal to his friends, whom he bound in great numbers, and retained their friendship once he had gained it. Darling William, oh, I can't go on. Having lived long enough to satisfy the claims of nature and his fame, he died on the 29th of October in the year of our Lord, 1729, in the 67th year of his age. Cheers, William. I was the oldest of 10, you know. But alas, William and I had no children of our own. My one great sorrow. I died in 1752. And upon my death, that Mary Delaney said, "It is a general loss. Her table was open to her friends of all ranks and her purse to the poor. She was a clever woman of business and wrote all her own letters. She was a plain and vulgar woman in her manner, although she had some valuable qualities. So long ago. But some things you just don't forget."
Good afternoon, and welcome to our chapel. I was born Lady Louisa Augusta Lennox in England in 1743, the third of the 4 Lennox sisters. You've heard of us, I'm sure. You may remember that book by Stella Tilliard, Aristocrats Caroline, Emily, Louisa and Sarah Lennox? No? You do! The BBC television series called Aristocrats was based on it. Us girls, the Lennox sisters, were daughters of Charles Lennox, 2nd Duke of Richmond, and Lady Sarah Cadogan. The 2nd Duke's father, the 1st Duke,
was an illegitimate son of King Charles II of England. Sadly, while still a child, my parents died within a year of each other. In 1750 and 1751, actually. After this, I was brought up by my much older sister, Emily Fitzgerald, Duchess of Leinster, in Carton House, near Maynooth, not far from here. At age 15, I married Thomas Connolly, grandnephew of William Connolly, Speaker of the Irish House of Commons. You know, Catherine's husband. Actually, Catherine and I had a lot in common. My husband was the quintessential gentleman, a keen huntsman, and a fine horseman, as well as a politician and landowner. We lived in Castletown House, the decoration of which I directed throughout the 1760s and 1770s. Unhappily, we were also childless, at which point we took up the welfare of young children from disadvantaged backgrounds as a lifelong project. You see, a royal charter was granted in 1733. It allowed for the foundation of schools managed by the Incorporated Society in Dublin for promoting English Protestant schools in Ireland. They were more commonly known as charter schools. In 1809, I agreed to the transfer of the Salvage Charity School, originally founded by William and Catherine Connolly as a private charity school, to the Incorporated Society. It was now known as Salvage Charter School. I spent time and money employing teachers, examining girls' work, penning rules and prayers for use in the school. Thrift, self-sufficiency, and ecumenical religious observance were my priorities. We developed one of the first schools where boys learned trades and girls made the famous Castletown straw bonnets. That was where, called a slip hole. One newspaper, the Norfolk Chronicle, dated July 16th, 1796, said, "The straw bonnets, now so much the fashion, originated in Ireland, and from a praiseworthy motive, in Lady Louisa Connolly, who, to employ the poor of Salvage, a little village near Castletown. The seating of her ladyship and Mr. Connolly initiated the manufacture of straw into hats and bonnets. Females were the manufacturers. I built a new church, erected inside the gates, to replace the previous one, which had been destroyed by fire in the 1798 rebellion. My Thomas died in 1803. I continued to live in Castletown until my own death in 1821. So long ago.
Lady Langford, have you seen her? I'm looking for Lady Langford. Come with me, I think she went this way. Lady Langford! Caution, my lady! Please, if I may have a word! My lady! Excuse me, sir. Have you seen her? I'm looking for Lady Langford. No sign of her. Excuse me for my outburst. Permit me to introduce myself. My name is Charlotte Louisa Bates, and I am looking for my mistress, Lady Langford. Although we're both ghosts now, I still look out for her. Still try to stop her from making the greatest mistake of her life. She's probably gone to Ardgillen. She goes there regularly searching for him and the children, even though her resting place is here, in the mausoleum, along with the rest of the Connollys. My poor, poor lady. Well, she's gotten away again. Let me tell you of the events that happened in Ardgillen Castle on November the 3rd, 1853. A day forever ingrained in my memory.
Wait a minute, Charlotte. Let's start from the beginning. I was born on the 12th of June, 1822, the eldest daughter of the 10 children of Edward Michael Pakenham. However, in order to fulfill Daddy's great-aunt's will, that's Louisa Connolly, who you met earlier, and to inherit Castletown House, my father had to change his name by royal licence to Connolly. Thus, we his children were now called by that family name. Moving forward to the day in question, I was a house guest in Ardgillen, whilst my husband, Clothworthy Wellington Robert Rowley, was away grouse shooting in Scotland. Everyone in the household was aware that I was an enthusiastic swimmer, no matter what the season. And so, on that dull November morning, I decided to go for a bracing swim.
Yes, that was near Ardgillen. You can picture the scene. Blustery gusts of wind, grey waves, not exactly enticing. As her trusted servant, I tried in vain to dissuade her from the undertaking, but she was not returning. Despite my best efforts, Louisa's body was taken from the water that day and was hastily brought up to Ardgillen Castle, where she died. How could I let it happen? Well, as I told the coroner's inquest, Lady Langford instructed me to bring her bathing gear to the usual spot at Barnagira for her daily dip that day. I arrived down the steps to the shoreside, followed by Lady Langford. Quickly I undressed her ladyship. She stopped and said,
"Do you think the sea is rougher than yesterday?"
"It is less than favourable, to be sure, my lady. Don't go out too far."
"Oh, there is no fear, Charlotte."
She waded in. I noticed her working with her hands as if she had lost her footing. So I raced into the sea in an attempt to rescue her, but was beaten back by the waves. I made my way back to the shore again, took off my outer clothes, then re-entered the water, but its forces sent me backwards. I couldn't help, so I ran for assistance. I spotted men working in a nearby field, but they couldn't swim and would not enter the water. I noticed my lady in the water, not moving and lying on her back. About an hour after Lady Langford had entered the water, a gardener from Ardgillen came upon the scene. He went into the water and caught hold of the body, pushing it ahead of him. He went as far as he could before he had to retire to the safety of the shore, due to the heavy swell of the sea. I was devastated. In the meantime, a boat had been launched from Balbriggan. At about 1:40 p.m, the boat brought her ashore and carried her up the cliffside, across the bridge and on into the roads of Ardgillen Castle. The servants rushed to make her up a hot bath and placed her in it. We tried everything we could, but it was no use. The surgeon examined the body but found no signs of violence whatsoever. It was a simple case of drowning. She was just 34 years of age. It was the worst day of my life. Lord Langford had planned to return home to his wife on the evening of her death. They had 4 young children. After the tragedy, he went back to Castletown House, where he died 8 months later. He was never the same after. He died of a broken heart. He's here too, you know.
Darlings! Darlings! Mummy is looking for her darlings. I will find you. You know I will.
Now, over 150 years later, Some say her ghost still walks the route of the beach at Barnagira, up the steps to the ladies' stairs, across the road, and on into the grounds of Ardgilling Castle, searching for the family and husband she had to leave behind on that gruesome day. Every day I try to stop her, to tell her that it is all in vain. So long ago.
I am the ghost of Sarah Napier, or Lady Sarah Lennox, as was. Oh, I'm not interred in this graveyard. Merely visiting my sister, Louisa Connolly, and my home next door, where I spent many happy years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. When I was 6 and my sister Louisa 8, we were orphaned and sent to Ireland to live with our oldest sister, Emily, in Carton House, as per my father's will. I stayed until I was 13 and then returned to London, to the home of my oldest sister, Caroline. At 15, I went to court. I was considered a great beauty in my day and caught the eye of the young Prince of Wales, later George III, who wanted to marry me. At 17, I married racing magnate Charles Bunbury. But the less said about that, the better. Suffice to say, we were divorced in 1776. 5 years later, I found myself in a much happier second marriage with Colonel George Napier, and we had 8 children. In 1785, George and I came to live in Oakley Park, or Salvage Hall as it was then called, in the grounds of St. Rayfield's here. All our children were born here, except Charles, the oldest. When we Napiers lived in Salvage Hall, the house soon became known in the neighbourhood as the Eagle's Nest. It could have been because of the hook noses possessed by my husband and boys, but I prefer to think it was because of their high spirits. Many a tale was told in the Salvage of that day, of the escapades of my boys growing up. Charles, George, and William Napier went to school in the village, in what was called Salvage Academy, in what we now call Kildrout House. All the boys in the academy were Roman Catholic, but that didn't bother George and I. A Protestant boarding school existed in St. Wilson's at the time, and on one occasion, Charles marched a band of schoolboys whom he had organised and drilled past St. Wilson's and attacked the boys of the institution. Serious consequences were only prevented by Charles riding his little Arab pony. Bless him, called off his youthful troops. He was an army man from the beginning. In those days there were pigs in Salvage Main Street, tall, gaunt animals with wide flapping ears. Often my boys would mount these pigs and career homeward with school friends and pig owners following in wild pursuit. Who would imagine that the antics of those days would form the basis of military careers for my boys? Wellington colonels, that was what they were called. I could have not been prouder. George was knighted for distinguished service in the Peninsular Wars during the Napoleonic Wars. He was Commander-in-Chief later in the Cape Colony, South Africa, where he abolished slavery. Then, Sir Charles fought with distinction in the Peninsular Wars. He later commanded in India, and for his part in the conquest of the Indian province of Sindh, he is known as Napier of Sindh. He is commemorated by a bronze statue in Trafalgar Square, London, and a marble statue in the crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral, London. And Sir William fought with distinction also in the Peninsular Wars, and he is remembered for his celebrated history of the Peninsular Wars. And of course they saw real bloodshed growing up, not just in play. The days of the rebellion, 1798, were sad days for Salvage. Wounded men constantly brought into the village, and the village itself was twice ordered to be burnt. Only waved through the intervention of my husband, George Napier. And Salvage Hall, our home too, was attacked. And on the knocker of the hall door you can still see the blow of a sledgehammer, wielded by some of those who wanted to attack our home. And of course, in this enclosed graveyard, you can still see the ruins of the old church, burnt in the same year, 1798. So long ago.